Mia lived in a tiny apartment on the quiet side of town, where the paint on the walls was fading, and the sound of old buses passing by filled the evenings. She wasn't rich, not even close, but she had something stronger than money: determination. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, made a quick cup of instant coffee, and got her son ready for school. His name was Leo, a bright little boy with messy brown hair and eyes full of dreams. Her days were long and full of work. She had 2 part-time jobs, one at a small bakery where she served fresh bread and pastries, and another cleaning offices downtown. Sometimes her hands ached from all the scrubbing, but she never complained. She smiled through the tiredness because she knew Leo depended on her. She often said to herself, "I'll give him the life I never had," and that thought gave her strength every single day. When she came home in the evening, she changed out of her uniform and sat at her old piano, the same one she had owned since she was a teenager. The wood was scratched and some keys didn't sound right anymore, but when she played, everything around her felt beautiful. Music was her escape, her safe place. It was the one thing that made her forget how hard life was. Mia loved teaching piano to kids in her neighborhood. She didn't charge much, just enough to buy groceries or pay a small bill. Sometimes she even taught for free when the parents couldn't afford it. She believed music should be shared, not sold, she used to tell her students. "You don't play with your fingers, you play with your heart." And the children adored her for that. Even though her life was filled with struggles, Mia never let sadness control her. She laughed easily. She found joy in simple things: the smell of bread baking, the sound of rain on her window, or the way Leo would run to hug her when she came home. But behind that smile, she carried a quiet pain. She missed having someone to lean on, someone who could share the load. Nights were the hardest after Leo went to sleep. She would sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, and wonder what her life might have been if things had turned out differently. Her husband had left when Leo was still a baby, promising to come back but never did. Mia had learned not to wait. She built her life from the ground up, piece by piece, with no one to rely on but herself. The world had not been kind to her, yet she refused to be bitter. Instead, she poured all her love into her son and her music. That was how she healed. At the community center, people knew her as the piano lady. She often volunteered there, playing soft tunes while kids practiced art or dance. Her melodies filled the old building with warmth. Even when the heaters didn't work, one day a staff member said, "Mia, your music makes this place feel alive." She just smiled shyly, not realizing how true those words were. Despite her struggles, Mia's heart was full of hope. She believed that good things would come if she kept doing her best. Still, there were moments when the weight of life almost broke her. Some nights, she counted coins from her tip jar, trying to figure out if she could afford both rent and groceries. Sometimes the answer was no, and she would quietly skip dinner so Leo could eat more. Yet she never let him see her worry. To him, she was a superhero. Strong, gentle, and full of music. Mia's dream was simple. She wanted to open her own small music school someday, a place where children from poor families could learn piano for free. She imagined bright rooms, laughter, and music flowing through the air. But for now it remained just that, a dream, something she held close to her heart during sleepless nights. People often overlooked her. She didn't wear fancy clothes or drive a nice car, but there was something special about her that money couldn't buy: kindness. She carried it in her voice, her smile, and every note she played. It was the kind of kindness that made people feel seen, even when they felt invisible. Her story began like any ordinary one: a mother, a piano, a quiet life filled with struggles and small joys. Yet fate was quietly preparing something extraordinary for her. She didn't know that soon. One simple act of compassion would change everything. Her world was about to collide with someone she never imagined meeting, and her music, once played for survival, would soon become the bridge between 2 very different worlds. That night, as she tucked Leo into bed, she whispered softly, "One day, everything will be better." He smiled sleepily and said, "I know, Mommy, because you make everything better." Mia kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and sat down at her piano once more. Her fingers moved across the keys gently, filling the room with a lullaby of hope. It was the same song she always played when she needed courage. She didn't know it yet, but that very song would soon reach the heart of a little girl in pain, and a man who had the power to change her life forever. It was a cold afternoon, and rain tapped softly against the windows of the community center. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and old wood. Children's laughter usually filled the place, but that day it was unusually quiet. Mia had come straight after her shift at the bakery. Her hands still smelled of bread, and her apron had a little flour on it. She didn't mind. Music was her escape, and the old piano in the corner was waiting for her like an old friend. She sat down and gently lifted the piano lid. Her fingers brushed across the keys as if greeting them. She began to play a calm melody, something soft and slow, the kind of music that feels like a deep breath after a long day. Her notes floated through the air, echoing through the empty hall, but suddenly, she heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the music. It was crying, soft but heartbreaking, coming from the far end of the room. Mia paused and looked around. Near the window sat a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her little shoulders were shaking, her face hidden behind her arms. She looked lost. Her hair was messy and her eyes red from tears. Something inside Mia pulled her toward the child. She stood up slowly and walked over, careful not to startle her. "Hey, sweetheart," Mia said softly, kneeling down beside her. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't reply, she just hugged her knees tighter. Trembling, it was clear she was scared, maybe even panicking. Mia recognized that look. It was the same one she had seen in Leo's eyes years ago when he woke from a nightmare. She knew that words might not work right now, so she didn't push. Instead, she stood up quietly, walked back to the piano, and began to play again this time. The melody was gentler, deeper, almost like a whisper. She closed her eyes and let the music speak for her. Each note carried warmth and calm. The rain outside joined in, tapping like a quiet drum. The sound wrapped around the room like a blanket. For a moment, everything felt still. The little girl's breathing slowed. She looked up, her eyes searching for the source of the sound. She watched as Mia swayed slightly while playing, completely lost in the rhythm. There was something comforting in her presence, something safe. Mia's music wasn't perfect, and some notes were slightly off-key, but it didn't matter. It was real and it was full of heart. Mia didn't look at the girl. She just kept playing, giving her space to listen, to feel, to breathe. Slowly, the child stood up and took a few hesitant steps closer. Her sobs faded into quiet sniffles. She sat down on the bench beside Mia, her tiny hands resting on her lap. Together, they listened to the sound of the rain and the piano blending like an old song. After a while, Mia spoke gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "Music helps when words can't, doesn't it?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the keys. "My mom used to play," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But she's gone now." Mia's heart ached at those words. She wanted to hug her, but she didn't instead. She played a few more notes, light and tender. "Then let's play for her," she said, smiling faintly. "She'll hear it. Wherever she is." The girl's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were quiet ones, gentle. She reached out and touched the keys, pressing one uncertainly. Mia nodded, encouraging her soon. They were playing together, one hand small and unsure, the other steady and kind. The melody became a conversation without words. Two hearts speaking through music. They played until the lights in the hall grew dim and the rain began to slow. When the last note faded, Mia turned to the girl and smiled. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," she whispered, her voice tiny but clear. "That's a beautiful name," Mia said warmly. "I'm Mia." Lily nodded for the first time, her face softened. She even managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "For the song," Mia smiled back. "You're welcome, Lily. Anytime you feel sad, remember, you can always let the music talk for you." They sat in silence for a moment, watching raindrops slide down the window. The world outside seemed softer now, calmer. Something had shifted. A connection had formed between two souls. One broken, one weary, but both touched by the same melody. What Mia didn't know was that they were not alone. Standing quietly near the doorway was a man in a dark coat, his expensive shoes leaving tiny puddles on the floor. He had been there the whole time, watching, listening. His heart heavy and amazed at the same moment. He was Ethan Carter, Lily's father, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. Yet in that moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a CEO. He was just a father watching a stranger comfort his daughter in a way he never could. He had brought Lily to the community center, hoping she might open up during the art class. But when he returned, he found her in tears, unable to speak. He had been about to step in when the sound of the piano stopped him. The melody held something he hadn't felt in years. Gentleness. As he watched, he saw Lily's tears turn into calmness, saw her tiny shoulders relax, and then that rare smile, It hit him deeply. This woman, in her simple clothes and tired eyes, had reached his daughter's heart with nothing but music. Mia, unaware of the man's gaze, continued comforting Lily, her smile humble, her voice soft. She never imagined that this small act of kindness would change her entire life, and that the man standing in the shadows would soon return, not just to thank her, but to bring her into a world she never thought she'd belong to. That night, as Mia walked home in the rain, she hummed the tune she had played, her shoes soaked, her coat thin, yet her heart felt strangely light. She had no idea that her kindness had been witnessed, and that destiny had quietly started composing the next chapter of her life, one note at a time. The next morning, the sun peeked through the curtains of Mia's small apartment, spreading a warm glow across the room. Leo was still asleep, curled up under his blanket. Mia quietly made breakfast, toast and a boiled egg. Her mind, however, was far away. She couldn't stop thinking about the little girl from yesterday, Lily, the way she had cried, the way she had slowly found calm in the music, and the way her small fingers had trembled when she touched the piano keys. There had been something special about that moment, something almost magical. Mia had played for many children before, but never had she seen such a transformation happen so quickly. It was as if the music had found its way straight into the girl's heart, and now Mia couldn't help but wonder where Lily was, or if she was okay. After dropping Leo off at school, Mia went to the community center again. It was quiet as usual, just a few kids running around and an old janitor sweeping the floor. She sat at the piano, brushing off a little dust. The keys felt cold under her fingers. She began to play the same tune she had played yesterday. Slow, gentle, full of emotion. She closed her eyes and let the melody flow. Remembering Lily's face halfway through the song, she heard a small voice. "You're playing it again." Mia opened her eyes and smiled. Lily stood by the door holding a small stuffed bear. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her eyes were brighter than yesterday. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mia said softly. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again. My dad said I could come," Lily replied shyly, walking closer. "I told him I wanted to learn the song you played." Mia's heart melted. "Of course," she said, patting the seat beside her. "Come, let's play it together." Lily climbed up beside her, her little hands resting nervously on the keys. Mia placed her own hands gently over Lily's, guiding her fingers. "See this?" she said. "Each note is like a feeling when you play gently. It's like whispering to your heart." They began slowly, the tune uneven at first, but as minutes passed, something beautiful happened. The awkward sounds turned into music. Lily's small fingers followed Mia's lead, pressing the keys with growing confidence. Each note seemed to chase away a bit of the sadness that had clung to her. As they played, Lily started to hum softly. Her voice fragile but sweet. Mia smiled. She could hear hope in that hum. It was like a flower blooming after a storm. "You're doing amazing," she said gently. "You have music inside you." Lily, the little girl, looked up at her, eyes wide. "Really? You think so?" Mia nodded. "I don't just think so, I can feel it." For a moment, Lily looked like she might cry again, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled, a real, glowing smile, and kept playing. At that exact moment, standing behind the glass door of the hall, Ethan Carter was watching again. He had brought Lily to the center but decided to stay in his car. However, when he saw his daughter running inside eagerly, he followed, drawn by curiosity. He had no idea what made Lily so attached to this woman, but when he heard the music, he understood. The sound coming from the piano wasn't just notes, it was emotion, raw and pure. He leaned against the doorway listening. The sight before him touched something deep within. Lily looked alive again. Her laughter, faint but real, filled the room. And for the first time in months, Ethan saw his little girl being herself. He noticed how Mia looked at Lily, not with pity but with love and patience. She wasn't trying to fix her. She was simply there, giving her warmth and calm through her music. It was something money couldn't buy, something he, despite all his wealth, could never give his daughter on his own. After the lesson, Lily ran to her father, her eyes bright. "Daddy, Miss Mia taught me a song. Look," she said, pressing a few keys proudly. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile, one that felt strange after so long. "That's wonderful." "Sweetheart," he said, then turned to Mia. "You must be the piano teacher." Mia stood up, a little surprised by his sudden presence. "Yes," she said politely, "I'm Mia." "It's nice to meet you." "Ethan Carter," he said, shaking her hand, his grip firm but warm. "Thank you for yesterday. You helped my daughter more than you know." Mia smiled modestly. "I'm glad she's feeling better. She's a wonderful girl." He nodded, looking at her curiously. "You have a gift, you know that? It's not just your music, it's how you make people feel safe." Mia blushed slightly. "I just do what I can," she said softly. "Sometimes music says what words can't." Ethan nodded, thoughtful. He wasn't used to simple honesty. Most people around him spoke in polished tones, chasing his approval. But Mia was different, genuine, humble. Her presence felt peaceful. Before leaving, Ethan said, "Lily would love to continue learning, if you're available." "Of course," Mia said, smiling. "I'd be happy to teach her." As they walked away, Mia watched them from the doorway. She noticed how Ethan placed his hand gently on Lily's shoulder, and how Lily leaned into him with trust. It made her heart warm. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far greater. That evening, as Mia walked home, the sky was painted orange and pink. She hummed the tune Lily had learned. The melody felt brighter now, lighter. She thought about how a simple song had connected two hearts, hers and Lily's, and maybe even reached someone else's. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his car outside their mansion, watching Lily play quietly with her teddy bear. He thought about Mia's words. Sometimes music says what words can't. He realized she was right. Maybe it wasn't just Lily who needed healing. Maybe he did too. The piano had not only calmed his daughter, it had awakened something in him, a longing for warmth, for simplicity, for the kind of peace that no amount of money could ever buy. And though he didn't know it yet, that longing would soon bring him back to the woman whose music had changed everything, one quiet note at a time. That night the city was alive with glittering lights, cars rushing past, people hurrying home. But in a tall glass building overlooking everything, Ethan Carter sat in his office. Staring out at the skyline, he had been there for hours. Yet his mind wasn't on the files scattered across his desk. It was on a woman, the piano teacher with tired eyes and a calm smile, and the sound of that melody that still echoed in his head like a heartbeat. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who got distracted easily. He was known for being sharp, decisive, and cold when needed. He had built his empire from nothing, turning his company into one of the biggest in the city. People called him the man with the golden mind, but lately, all his success felt strangely empty. He had everything: money, status, power. Yet none of it could fix what was broken inside his home. Since his wife's death 2 years ago, Ethan had been trying to fill the silence that followed. But the harder he tried, the more distant Lily became. She had stopped smiling, stopped talking to her friends. She barely slept at night. And whenever he reached out, she would pull away. He had hired the best therapists, doctors, and counselors money could find, but nothing worked. And then, one simple tune from a stranger's piano had done what none of them could. It had reached his daughter's heart. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He could still see the image of Mia sitting by that dusty piano, her fingers moving gently, her expression full of warmth. She wasn't performing, she was feeling, and that made all the difference. There was something almost magical about her, something that didn't belong in his world of boardrooms and numbers. The next morning, he couldn't shake the thought of her. While having breakfast, he watched Lily quietly hum the same tune Mia had played. She was even smiling, a small, shy smile, but real. "You like your piano teacher, huh?" he asked, his voice soft. Lily nodded. "She's nice, Daddy." "She listens to the music?" That sentence made Ethan pause. "She listens to the music, not just plays it." Those were Lily's exact words. And they stayed with him later that day. Instead of heading straight to a meeting, Ethan took a detour. His driver looked surprised when he told him to stop at the community center. "Just wait here," he said, stepping out. The sound of children's laughter greeted him as he entered. The smell of old wood and crayons filled the air, and in the far corner, there she was, Mia, her hair tied loosely, her hands gliding gracefully over the keys as a few kids clapped along. She looked completely in her element, happy, alive, and so real that Ethan found himself smiling without realizing it. He stayed near the door unnoticed, watching again. There was something peaceful about the way she moved. Her whole body seemed to speak through the music, and when she looked up to correct one of the kids with a gentle laugh, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. It had been a long time since anything had made him feel like that. After the class ended, he finally stepped forward. "You play beautifully," he said, his voice low but sincere. Mia looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled politely. "Mr. Carter, you're here again. I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, glancing at the piano. "Lily's been talking about you nonstop." Mia chuckled softly. "She's a sweet girl, she just needed someone to listen." He nodded. "Seems like you're very good at that." There was a brief silence, the kind that felt comfortable, then Ethan said, "You know, when I saw you playing the first time I realized something." "What's that?" Mia asked curiously. "That money can buy a piano," he said slowly. "But not the soul to play it." Mia looked at him, a little surprised by the honesty in his tone. "Maybe," she said gently, "but sometimes people just need to remember how to listen, not just to music, but to life." Her words hit him deeper than she knew for a moment. Ethan didn't feel like a billionaire or a businessman. He felt like a man who had forgotten what it meant to truly feel. He looked around the old hall, the chipped walls, the broken chairs, the worn-out piano. Yet everything here felt more alive than his mansion, more real than his polished office. "You do all this voluntarily?" he asked. Mia nodded. "Mostly, yes. The center can't pay much, but it's not about the money. It's about what music can do for people. It gives them hope." "Hope," Ethan repeated quietly, as if testing the word. "That's something I've almost forgotten." Mia smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time to remember." For a moment they just stood there. Two very different people, one from a world of luxury, the other from struggle. Yet somehow, they understood each other perfectly. Ethan felt a pull, a quiet connection he couldn't explain. As he left the community center, he turned back once more. Watching Mia gather her music sheets, the afternoon sun fell across her face, highlighting the calm determination in her eyes. And in that instant, Ethan knew she wasn't just a piano teacher. She was something far more. A woman who carried light in a world that had forgotten how to shine. That night he couldn't focus on work again. He found himself sitting by the grand piano in his living room, an instrument that hadn't been touched since his wife's death. He pressed one key, then another. The sound felt empty, cold. He closed his eyes and tried to remember how Mia's hands had moved, how she had played with emotion instead of perfection. Slowly, he started to play the melody he had heard her perform, shaky at first, but then steadier, warmer. It was the same tune that had calmed Lily. And for the first time in 2 years, Ethan felt tears roll down his face. Meanwhile, across town, Mia was tucking Leo into bed. She smiled as he mumbled sleepily, "Mom, did you have a good day?" She nodded, brushing his hair back. "Yes, baby. I think something good is starting." She didn't know that at that very moment. A billionaire was sitting alone at his piano, rediscovering something he thought he'd lost forever. Not just the love for music, but the feeling of being alive. And though neither of them realized it yet, their worlds had quietly intertwined, bound together by one simple song. A melody that had begun in a small, worn-out community center and would soon echo through both their lives, changing everything one note at a time. The next morning began like any other for Mia, sunlight sneaking through her thin curtains, the faint smell of coffee filling the air, Leo sitting at the table eating cereal while humming one of her piano tunes. But something felt different. A quiet energy she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the melody still stuck in her head, or the strange feeling that her life was about to change. After dropping Leo off at school, she hurried to the community center, humming softly. The old piano waited for her like a friend. She dusted it off and began to play. The notes drifted through the hall, wrapping the air in warmth. Her fingers danced lightly, free and full of emotion. She didn't notice the tall man standing by the door, watching silently. Ethan Carter, dressed in his usual expensive suit, though his presence looked far too grand for the peeling paint and squeaky floors of the hall. There was something different in his face this time. Not the confident, commanding look of a businessman, but something softer, something unsure. He waited until she finished her song before speaking. "You really do make that piano sound alive." Mia looked up, startled but smiling. "Mr. Carter, you're here again," he nodded, stepping closer. "Please, call me Ethan," he said with an easy smile. "I didn't mean to interrupt. But I wanted to talk to you." Mia tilted her head, curious. "Of course, is everything all right? Is Lily okay?" "She's more than okay," Ethan said, his voice warm with gratitude. "I haven't seen her this happy in years. She keeps talking about you, about the song, the lessons. How you make the piano talk, as she puts it. Mia smiled, her heart lifting. She's a wonderful student. Music helps her open up. It's beautiful to see, Ethan nodded, then took a slow breath, his expression turning thoughtful. Mia, I want to thank you properly. Not just with words, she looked confused. You already thanked me, Ethan. That's enough. He shook his head slightly. No, it's not, he said. You've done more for my daughter than anyone else. And I don't think it's fair that you struggle to keep this place running while giving so much of yourself to others. Mia frowned gently. I don't do it for money, I do it because it matters. I know, he said quickly. That's exactly why it matters so much. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. I want to help you. Think of it as an investment, not charity. She hesitated, holding the envelope but not opening it. Ethan, I can't accept this, please, he said softly. Just read it. Inside was a letter and a check, a large amount, far more than she had ever seen. Her breath caught. Ethan, this could keep the community center open for years. That's the idea, he said with a small smile. I've seen what music can do, what you can do. I want to fund your work. Piano lessons, therapy programs, anything that brings this kind of healing to people who need it. Mia's hands trembled slightly. Why me? She asked quietly. You could hire professionals, build a program yourself. Why me? Ethan looked at her steadily. Because professionals couldn't do what you did for my daughter, he said simply. You didn't just teach her music. You reached her heart. That's something I can't buy. No one can. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of children laughing outside floated in through the window. The piano sat between them like a silent witness. Mia finally exhaled, her eyes soft. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he replied with a smile. Mia laughed nervously. You make it sound so easy. Maybe it is, he said. Sometimes the right things don't need to be complicated. She looked at him, really looked at him this time, and the man behind the suit. The father who carried silent pain. The person who had everything yet still felt lost. She saw kindness there and sincerity, not pity, and for the first time, she considered that maybe accepting help didn't mean weakness. Maybe it was the start of something new. Finally, she nodded. All right, she said softly. But on one condition, this isn't about me. It's about the kids, about giving them a place to feel safe, to dream, Ethan smiled, relief flickering across his face. Agreed. It's about them, he extended his hand. She hesitated for a second before shaking it, his hand warm, firm. Her heart skipped for reasons she didn't quite understand. Over the next few weeks, everything began to change. New pianos arrived at the community center. Repairs were made. Fresh paint covered the cracked walls. The hall felt alive again, brighter, busier. Children filled the rooms with laughter and music. And at the center of it all was Mia, teaching, smiling, glowing. Lily came every day now, always running straight to Mia with excitement. Her fear had faded, replaced by confidence. She played beautifully, her small hands steady, her smile constant. Ethan watched often from the back, never interrupting, but his eyes always following Mia. He admired her spirit, her quiet strength, her refusal to be changed by kindness, and how, even when surrounded by new opportunities, she stayed humble. One afternoon as she finished teaching, he handed her a coffee and said with a grin, You know, I think you've started something much bigger than a music program. Mia smiled. Maybe, but it's still about simple things and a song, a smile, a little hope. Ethan nodded. And maybe a little faith too. They both laughed softly, the sound warm and easy. Something between them had shifted, something neither of them wanted to name yet. That night, Mia walked home under a sky full of stars. Her hands still tingling from the music, her heart full. She thought about how strange life was, how a random moment, a song played for a crying child, had led to this, to a new beginning. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, it didn't scare her, and far across town, Ethan looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. Her face calm, he whispered to himself. Thank you, Mia, not as a businessman, but as a father who finally felt whole again. Neither of them realized it yet, but this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of something extraordinary, something written not in words, but in music, heart, and fate, one note at a time. The weeks that followed felt like the first days of spring after a long, cold winter. The community center, once dull and half forgotten, now buzzed with laughter, music, and the hopeful chatter of children. Sunlight streamed through freshly cleaned windows, reflecting off the shiny new pianos that lined the room. But the brightest thing in the whole place wasn't the instruments or the lights. It was Mia. Every day she arrived early, arranging sheet music, tuning the pianos, and setting up for her classes. The same hall that once echoed with loneliness now overflowed with joy. Children played scales, made mistakes, laughed, and tried again. And Mia, always patient, guided them gently. She wasn't just teaching notes. She was teaching courage. Lily became her most dedicated student. She never missed a class. She was no longer the shy, trembling girl Mia had first met. Her music had become her language, her way of smiling again when she played. Her small face glowed with focus and pride. Sometimes she would stop mid-song just to say, "Miss Mia, can I try it one more time?" And Mia would nod, her eyes full of warmth. One quiet afternoon, Mia sat beside Lily at the piano, helping her practice a piece for the upcoming children's recital. Lily's hands moved gracefully across the keys, the tune soft but full of emotion. "Beautiful," Mia said softly. "You're not just playing. You're feeling the music," Lily grinned. "Like you taught me," she said, her voice full of joy. Ethan watched them from the doorway unnoticed. He had started visiting more often now, not for business or out of obligation, but because he genuinely loved being there. The sound of children laughing, the warmth of the place, and most of all, the way Mia's presence seemed to fill the air. There was something about her that drew him in. She didn't chase wealth or status. She didn't care who he was. She simply was. Genuine, strong, kind. She treated everyone the same, even him. A billionaire who could buy anything. Yet with her, he felt like just a man. Human. Vulnerable. Real. That day, after Lily's lesson ended, he approached smiling. "You two sound wonderful together," Mia turned. Surprised, then smiled back. "She's improving fast." "I think she has a natural gift," Lily beamed proudly. "Daddy, Miss Mia says I can play at the recital." Ethan chuckled. "I'll be there in the front row." Cheering louder than anyone, Mia laughed softly. "Careful. You might embarrass her." He raised an eyebrow playfully. "That's a father's job, isn't it?" They both laughed, and for a moment the world around them faded. Just three people standing in a hall full of sunlight and laughter. Yet beneath the surface, something tender was quietly blooming. Something neither of them dared to name. In the evenings, when classes ended, Ethan would often stay back to help Mia close up. Though she insisted she could manage alone, he always found an excuse to linger. "Let me help you move this," or, "It's not safe for you to walk home alone sometimes." They'd sit by the piano talking long after the lights dimmed. Mia told him stories about her childhood, how she learned piano from her grandmother, how music was the only thing that kept her going after her husband left. Ethan, in return, shared memories of his late wife, how she used to play the violin for Lily before bedtime. Their conversations were gentle, honest, filled with a warmth that made both of them forget the time. One evening, rain poured heavily outside, thunder rumbling softly in the distance. They were the last two left in the hall. Ethan leaned against the piano, watching Mia pack her notes. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first saw you playing for Lily, I thought it was just luck that brought you into her life. And now?" she asked, glancing up at him. He smiled faintly. "Now I think it was something more, something meant to happen." Mia looked away for a second, pretending to focus on her papers, but her heart raced. "I don't know about fate," she said softly, "but I'm glad I was there that day." "Me too," he said simply, his voice low, sincere. There was a silence between them, not awkward, but full, like the quiet after a beautiful song, the kind that leaves your heart still humming. Outside, lightning flashed, and the room briefly filled with white light. Ethan stepped closer and gently said, "Let me drive you home." "It's too stormy to walk," she hesitated, then nodded. "All right, thank you." In the car, the world felt small and quiet. Raindrops tapped against the windows, and the city lights blurred into gold streaks. Leo was asleep when they arrived, so Ethan offered to wait until she got inside safely. But she turned to him before leaving, her eyes soft. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything you've done for the center, and for Lily." He shook his head slightly. "No, Mia, I should be thanking you for bringing her back to me." Their eyes met for a moment longer than either intended. Something unspoken passed between them, something gentle yet powerful. She smiled faintly, whispered goodnight, and closed the door, but as she walked inside, Her heart felt strangely light and full. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to intertwine naturally. Ethan would bring Lily to every class and sometimes stay after to talk. Mia found herself looking forward to those conversations more than she wanted to admit. Even Leo started to adore Ethan, who would sometimes bring him snacks or small gifts. Calling him Buddy, for the first time in years, both families, one rich, one poor, began to blend into something like home. Laughter replaced silence, music replaced pain, and hearts that had been lonely for too long began to heal. And as the recital drew near, the entire community center buzzed with excitement. Children practiced every day, parents volunteered, and Ethan funded everything quietly from behind the scenes. But when Mia played the opening melody for rehearsal, she noticed him watching her again, not as a businessman, not even as Lily's father, but as a man who had found something or someone worth listening to again. That night, as she sat by her window, she couldn't help but smile, her fingers tracing invisible piano keys on her lap. Somewhere deep down she knew music had brought her this far. But maybe, just maybe, love was beginning to write its own tune, soft, slow, and beautifully real. The night of the recital arrived like a dream Mia didn't want to wake from. The community center, once a quiet, forgotten corner of the city, now glowed with soft golden lights and the buzz of excitement. Children in their best clothes ran about nervously, clutching sheet music and whispering rehearsed notes under their breath. Parents filled the seats, smiling proudly. It was the first time this old hall had ever felt so alive. Mia stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone stand. She had worked for weeks to make this day perfect. Late nights, endless rehearsals, 1,000 small details. But seeing it all come together made her heart swell. She looked out into the crowd, spotting Leo sitting in the front row, waving eagerly, and beside him Lily and Ethan, both smiling. Ethan looked different tonight, not just because of the crisp suit or the elegant composure he always carried, but because there was a softness in his eyes. The same warmth she had seen when he watched Lily play. He wasn't the powerful businessman everyone whispered about. Tonight, he was simply a proud father. The lights dimmed and the recital began one by one. The children took the stage, their music filling the air with pure emotion. Some played nervous, shaky tunes, others played boldly, but each note carried the same heartbeat, hope. When it was Lily's turn, the room fell silent. Mia knelt beside her before she went on stage, whispering, "Remember what I told you? Sweetheart, don't just play the notes, tell your story." Lily nodded, her small fingers gripping Mia's hand tightly before walking onto the stage. The piano seemed huge next to her, but when she sat down, her posture straightened, her chin lifted. She looked out at the audience, found her father, and smiled. Then she began to play. The first few notes were soft, uncertain, but then they grew stronger, clearer, each key ringing like a piece of her heart finding its voice. She played the song Mia had written with her, The Heart's Whisper, a melody born from pain but transformed into something beautiful. The hall filled with warmth, and more than one person in the audience wiped away a tear. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was electric. And then, thunderous applause. Lily stood a little breathless and beamed as Ethan rose from his seat, clapping with pride that shone brighter than anything money could buy. Mia's eyes welled with tears. She had seen many performances, but this one was different. This was healing. After the recital, people crowded around Mia, praising her, thanking her for what she'd done. "You've given our children something precious," one mother said. "You've given them confidence," another added. Mia smiled humbly, saying only, "Music did that, not me." But inside, her heart glowed with quiet joy. Ethan approached her after the crowd began to thin, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. "For you," he said softly. Lily picked them herself. Mia accepted them with a smile. "They're beautiful, thank you." "You should be proud," he said, his voice warm. "What you've built here, it's more than a music program, it's a family." She looked around the room as parents laughing, children hugging, the sound of joy filling the air, and nodded. "Maybe it is," she said. "It feels like home." Ethan watched her as she spoke, her face glowing in the soft lights, her hair gently brushing her cheeks. He wanted to tell her how much she had changed his world, how her kindness had reached places in his heart he thought were long dead. But he stayed silent, afraid that words would break the magic of the moment. As the night came to an end, Lily tugged at Mia's sleeve. "Miss Mia, Daddy says we're having a small dinner to celebrate. You have to come. Mia hesitated. Oh, I don't know if... Ethan smiled. It would mean a lot if you joined us, he said. Please, after a moment she nodded. All right. But only for a little while. That little while turned into hours. They laughed, shared stories, and for the first time, Mia saw a side of Ethan that few others ever did. He was funny, gentle, and so human. He didn't talk about business or money. He talked about life, about Lily, about the small things that made him happy. She realized that behind the power and the wealth was a man who longed for simplicity, for connection. At one point, Lily fell asleep on the couch, her head resting on Ethan's arm. He looked down at her with love so deep it made Mia's heart ache. You know, he said quietly, for a long time, I thought I could fix everything with money, but it turns out, all I needed was a song and someone brave enough to play it. Mia smiled softly. Sometimes it's not about fixing things, she said. It's about learning to live again. He looked at her then, really looked, and the room suddenly felt smaller. Quieter their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The air between them was filled with everything they didn't say. Gratitude, admiration, something tender and growing, something that felt dangerously close to love. But Mia looked away first, clearing her throat. It's getting late. I should go. I'll drive you, Ethan said quickly. Standing up in the car, the city lights flickered outside, painting shadows across their faces. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that feels like music between two souls. When they reached her apartment, Mia turned to him. Thank you for everything. He smiled faintly. No, Mia, thank you for giving me back my daughter. She opened the door, hesitated, then said softly, Good night, Ethan. Good night. Mia, he replied, his voice low, almost tender. As she walked upstairs, she couldn't stop smiling. Clutching the lilies to her chest, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, maybe even happiness. Across town, Ethan watched her go until she disappeared inside, then leaned back in his seat, a smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know where this feeling would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same again. What started as a simple act of kindness had turned into something far greater. A new beginning for both of them. A reminder that love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it sneaks in quietly between piano notes and gentle smiles, rewriting the story of two broken hearts, one melody at a time. The morning after the recital, the world felt different for Mia. The sunlight streaming through her window seemed softer, warmer, more alive. She sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands, staring at the bouquet of white lilies Ethan and Lily had given her. Their scent filled the room like a quiet reminder of the night before. Her heart was full yet restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was waiting just beyond the horizon. The community center had become busier than ever. News of the recital had spread across town. Parents called to enroll their children. Donations began to arrive, and for the first time in years, Mia didn't have to worry about paying the rent or fixing broken piano pedals. Everything was changing. Beautifully. Unexpectedly and fast. Ethan visited more often now. Sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone. Though he always claimed it was to discuss the program's progress, Mia could see through that. His visits had little to do with business and everything to do with something deeper, something neither of them dared to name. On one sunny afternoon, as she arranged music sheets, she heard his familiar voice behind her. You've created something incredible here, Mia. She turned, smiling. We've created it, she corrected softly. You helped make this possible. Ethan shook his head. No, you gave it a soul. Mia laughed lightly, trying to hide the flutter in her chest. You always say things that sound like poetry. He smiled, leaning slightly against the piano. Maybe you're turning me into a poet. Their eyes met for a brief, electric second, and she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on a pile of sheet music. You're early today, she said, changing the subject. I wanted to talk to you before Lily's lesson, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. I've been thinking about expanding this, the program, the classes. Maybe even creating a music foundation in your name. Mia froze, surprised. In my name? Ethan, I can't, he interrupted gently. You can and you should. What you've done here deserves to be shared. Imagine what you could do for more children, for more families like yours. Her heart raced. The idea was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. But I'm just one person, she said softly. I don't know how to run something like that. That's where I come in, he said with a faint smile. I know business. You know music. We'd make a good team. The way he said we made her stomach flutter, she tried to hide her smile. You make it sound so simple. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, Sometimes the best things in life are. Before she could respond, the door burst open and Lily ran in, her laughter filling the air. Miss Mia! Daddy, look! She said, waving a paper in the air. They wrote about us in the newspaper. Ethan and Mia leaned down to look, and there it was, in a picture from the recital. Lily smiling proudly at the piano, Mia beside her, clapping. The headline read, Music that Heals. Local teacher transforms lives through kindness and song. Mia's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe it. The story spoke about her struggles, her students, the power of music, but most of all, it spoke about love, love in its purest form, the kind that heals quietly, note by note. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them sat on the front steps of the center, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Lily rested her head on Mia's shoulder. You're like family now, she whispered sleepily. Mia smiled softly, her heart swelling. That means a lot. Sweetheart. Ethan looked at them both, something tender flickering in his eyes. She's right, you've become a part of our lives. Mia? She met his gaze, the world seemed to fall away for a moment. And you've become part of mine, she said quietly, almost afraid of her own honesty. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotion, but neither needed words. The way their eyes lingered said everything. Days turned into weeks, and the new foundation, the Heart's Whisper Project, officially launched. Banners went up, reporters arrived, and children from across the city came to join. Mia stood at the podium during the opening ceremony. Wearing a simple dress, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. Music saved my life when I thought I had nothing left today. I hope it can do the same for others. Applause filled the hall. Ethan stood at the back, his eyes never leaving her, pride shining in every line of his face. He wasn't thinking about the cameras or the journalists, only about the woman standing on stage, the one who had turned his world upside down with her kindness and a song. That evening, after everyone had gone, Mia sat alone at the piano, her fingers gently tracing the keys. The hall was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with memories, laughter, music, hope. She began to play softly, the same melody she'd played the day she met Lily. Ethan entered quietly, his footsteps echoing faintly. He didn't speak, just stood there, listening. When the song ended, she turned, surprised to see him. You're still here? I didn't want to leave without saying something, he said, his voice low. You've changed my life, Mia, not just Lily's, mine too. She looked at him, speechless, her heart pounding. Ethan. He stepped closer, his gaze warm and certain. I used to think I had everything. Money, success, but I was empty. Then you came and somehow, you filled every silent space. Tears gathered in her eyes. I didn't do anything special, she whispered. I just played the piano. He smiled softly. No, you played my heart for a moment. Time stood still. Then he reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The air between them hummed with quiet magic, not the kind found in fairy tales, but the real kind. The kind that grows slowly, built on trust, kindness, and shared pain turned into beauty. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of children laughing as the last light of day faded. Inside, two souls found their rhythm. Not through grand promises, but through something much simpler, a melody of fate written long before they even met. Mia rested her head against his shoulder as the piano sat beside them, silent but alive, and for the first time in a long while everything felt complete, because sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder or applause. It arrives like a song, quietly, beautifully. And just when your heart is ready to listen, and that night, beneath the soft glow of the hall lights, Mia realized the truth she had always known deep down. That music had not just changed her life, it had written it one note at a time,